So I'm from a group called Reusable Toronto. We are, focused on shifting the city of Toronto to reuse. We're working to eliminate waste. This is our, mission statement, similar to what you guys might all expect. We want to move our city towards reuse. I'm personally from a group called the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T. We are Toronto's environmental advocacy organization. We've been working in Toronto for more than 35 years. We focus on social and environmental equity, and we really connect with a lot of community groups across the city. We started working on reuse as the city was developing single use and other waste strategies. For some context, for those of you who don't know, in Canada, the federal government has banned 6 single-use plastics since December 2023. This is contested in courts by the plastic industry, so it's sort of one of those things where people are kind of following the law, but it's not really being enforced while it's going to the courts. We don't really know what's going to happen, although the majority of Canadians support the ban. And there are some municipalities where municipal bylaws and regulations are being passed to sort of mirror the same federal ban. In case the federal ban falls apart, then those things would still be banned. So some municipalities in Canada have a plastic bag ban or a foam foodware ban, but these things have mainly made an impact on some of the bigger chains. They all have, most of them have switched to paper. At the municipal level, the City of Toronto has a single-use reduction strategy. And this started out, they started doing consultation on this since 2019. It's been going on for a long time, but of course the pandemic interrupted a lot of that. But they found really strong support overall from the public for municipal action to address single-use plastics and single-use items in general. Toronto's single-use strategy is material agnostic, so it's not just about plastic, it's about any type of single-use, which is really great. We were happy to see that. It started with sort of a voluntary phase of education and funding and support for businesses. And then in 2024, we got our first regulations passed, or they came into force. They were passed in November 23. And that includes a requirement to ask first for accessories and condiments, which immediately reduces costs for businesses and stops people giving you stuff that you don't even want. And then also, I noticed we were talking about BYO from the previous group. It's now law in Toronto that all restaurants and cafes have to accept when you bring your own cup. And the policy was also modified in September 2024 to require all restaurants to actually post a sign that they accept when you bring your own cup. And that includes at drive-thrus. So you can go to like a Starbucks, or our big Canadian chain is Tim Hortons. You can go through the drive-thru and tell them, I have my own cup. And then you get to the window and they pour it from their special jug into the cup. So it's pretty cool because there was a lot of work in Toronto before the Reusable Toronto Coalition started. There were a number of groups that were doing that sort of BYO approach. There's a group called Roncy Reduces started it all. They created a whole network called Canada Reduces. And it's about community members going door to door and talking to their own local restaurants to say, please accept BYO. We'll put a sticker in the window. We'll post it on our website and really promote it. And that helped sort of get some people used to the concept of BYO, but it never really gets you over that hurdle of beyond like 20% of people who might ever bring their own cup. So requiring that restaurants accept it has shifted that a little bit further. This is some of the materials the city provided. Not the best, but it's good in terms of different languages and trying to have lots of pictures. The next phase is what we're really looking forward to. So we've advocated to have the city look and to continue working on this and to consider reusable dishes for dine-in and to require reusables for events and big venues. So this is what we're very excited about, and that's kind of a lot of our focus for the next while. The consultation will be happening in the fall, and then there's going to be a vote sometime next year. So I'll tell you a little bit about the network. It started in 2022. We have about 46 endorsing groups. So that's like various community groups, some of the larger national environmental groups, as well as some smaller neighborhood-based ones. And then some businesses have endorsed. We haven't really done a big push on that recently. We've done things like training ambassadors to share a basic presentation on what Reusable Toronto is, that's been given at schools or at neighborhood association meetings or BIA meetings. We've had some online events and webinars. We've done a lot of collaborative research. So I'll talk a little bit about some of those. And we've done some pilot projects. And then we've mobilized people when there are votes coming up at council or opportunities to speak up. We have a sort of platform to tell people, hey, this is your chance to talk about why you want reuse. So I've presented to some of this information before, and I can share some links after. But one of the things that we've done a lot of is we've done collaborative research with researchers at the University of Toronto in a group called the Trash Team. And we went out and we talked to small businesses. So we actually interviewed small businesses across the city. And part of this was like a deliberate policy choice or a deliberate choice to impact local policy, because we know that local municipal councillors are concerned about the impact of any regulation on small businesses. They'll say, well, what about the small businesses? It's going to put people out of business. It's going to be really hard. So we wanted to go talk to small businesses and say, is it really going to affect them? From what I've seen, there tends to be a lot of lobbying from the really big chains, and the smaller businesses tend not to be so concerned. And that's what we found in our interviews. A lot of businesses say, yeah, I care about the environment. I care about my grandkids and my kids and what's going to happen. I don't want litter on the street. So a lot of them want to see more action, and they just wanted more guidance. We also found that 92% of customers that we surveyed really want restaurants to do more. The city consultation also found that lots of people want the city to do more. So having these numbers was really helpful in terms of opening the door to talk to councillors when votes came up. So we could say, hey, we interviewed or we surveyed 1,000 customers or even 500 customers. Just saying that kind of information would get councillors willing to listen. In 23 and 24, we did really concerted business outreach. So we worked with a series of waste-focused local grassroots groups and neighborhood groups, and then also members of a sort of network in Toronto called the Green Neighbours Network, which represents small little neighborhood-based community groups. And we had summer students paid for by like a federal grant, and they went door to door in different businesses across the city to say, hey, what are you doing to reduce waste? What do you think about accepting your own customers' cups? What do you think about providing reusable dishes when people dine in? Or have you ever thought about one of these reuse services? So they gathered a lot of information and shared resources. And what we were able to do is to show that 3 out of 4 restaurants that we talked to are planning or taking action to switch to reusables on some level. And it's a pretty broad range of options they had. But this map was really powerful because I could go talk to a councillor in, a suburban area of Toronto, the same municipality, and they'd say, well, if you talk to anyone in my neighborhood, you're not just talking to all the organic restaurants downtown, are you? And they'd say, no, actually, we talk to restaurants in your neighborhood, and this is what they think. So this was very helpful for us to sort of gauge what the different sort of sentiments and experience were in different parts of the city, and that's also powerful for our legitimacy in being able to talk to, elected officials. We created resources to share with them. We did some pilot studies with some of the businesses to encourage them to test out reusable takeout containers and bring your own cups or serving in reusables for dine-in. This took a lot of work. And then one other thing that we did, feels like a lot, we also did some quick calculations. What would it look like for a business who asks first? And, assuming that 70% of people don't actually want all those accessories, how much money could you save per small business? And we added it up based on those interviews with 600 businesses and looking at what kind of stuff they give out. And we could show that they could save lots and lots of money. This was based on something we heard from Reusable San Mateo, and I got in touch with them because of Upstream network meetings. So thank you for that. And we refined their model, and then we can share it back. So that was pretty fun. One thing I want to say is that in Toronto, there's a few reuse service providers, and in Canada, there's a few reuse service providers. But there's been a lot of focus on cafes and small restaurants, but going business by business is very slow, and it can be difficult because of questions like incentives and how do you get customers to understand it and where do they return and all that stuff we were talking about. It's very important to test that out, but it can also be very, at a certain point, you might hit a wall. There's also a high cost to start that up. So we found in our interviews with reuse services, some of them are saying that they're really looking to get more catering orders or starting to do larger orders or working with film studios or offices or even providing their reusables for events and at venues. And that's consistent with what Upstream has talked about, that looking at events and venues is really a big way to make the shift faster. Closed venues and major events are ideal because there's lots and lots of people, a lot of food and drink. People don't take their food to go when they go to a stadium. They eat it there. They don't go to a festival and bring their own lunch. They have to buy food there. So that really makes things a lot faster. There's also centralized operations. There's maybe only one or two people to talk to sort of get those decisions made rather than every single staff at every single small business. So as the industry and as thinking around reuse has shifted towards events, so have we. And this is our most recent success has been at looking at the FIFA World Cup. So this is going to be a massive event. Toronto is one of the 15 or 16 host cities. Vancouver is also going to be one of the host cities. There is so much attention and investment going into this, and there's a lot of talk about what sort of a legacy will be left behind in these cities. So we were excited. We said, oh, maybe we can do some research on the FIFA World Cup and how we can get reusables to this big event. And from like one little sort of aside note, I found it was really fun for us because we were talking to different elected staff and different staff at the city. Some of the staff at the city have heard us talk about reuse many, many times and seen all our reports. But this was like suddenly all the athletes and event type staff were like, oh yeah, let's talk about reuse. I hadn't thought about that before. So it was just sort of fun to get more reasons to talk to different people. We were lucky enough, T was able to get funding from Environment Climate Change Canada to do a big study looking at the FIFA World Cup and what would it mean to have it switch to reuse. And we did some calculations and worked out that just having reusable cups at the Toronto and Vancouver events could avoid 2.3 million disposals. This is exciting numbers that we could share with the FIFA Secretariat in Toronto and in Vancouver and talk to different reuse service providers and talk to some of the event organizers. And we also were able to connect with our network members to get some case studies to include in that bigger report. So for example, Evergreen Brickworks is a really cool community event space in Toronto that has farmers markets and craft beer festivals and lots of nature learning stuff, but they have reusable dishes. And they have been using reusable dishes for food and drink for about a year, and they shared with us what they learned. We also did a case study on Pride Festival. So, one of the biggest Pride festivals in Canada, I guess probably the biggest. And they had reusable cups at 2 of their stages. And we were able to ask them questions. How did it work? How did you make this so effective? What did people think? And sharing those stories and having like local connections to talk about that has been really powerful also with talking about how we can shift to reuse. And it started to shift the thinking on what's possible in our city. So when we talk to people, it's not just about going business by business and person by person to convince them to carry a cup or something. It's about one decision maker making a shift and taking it off the individual responsibility or individual blame for people not following the rules and saying, why aren't these big event organizers taking more responsibility for it? So some of the strengths of the Reusable Toronto Network so far has been our policy experience. At T, we are a policy advocacy organization, so we understand how decisions get made through City Hall, and I can see that's really impacted our choices about what kind of steps we take strategically. We've had amazing partnerships for research and outreach. Our U of T contacts, York University contacts, we have community groups that have been really excited to jump in. The research and case studies that we've done provide a lot of proof of concept, what we think the city could do and what's possible, which has helped get people past that. But how does that work? Would that really work? Kind of question. We say, look, it's already been done. Let's just talk about how to make it work here. And then there's enough reuse businesses in Toronto that's been really helpful. Some of our next steps, we're going to keep advocating for fully adopting reuse at the FIFA games. So there's the big sports people that have to decide about what's going on in the stadium, but there's also the municipally run for all the FIFA host cities. There's a fan festival, and that runs for about 25 days during the whole tournament. And that actually will probably have a bigger impact because anybody can go to those events and watch the games on big screens. And those, because they're run by each municipality, the city has more control over that. So we're really pushing to get reusable cups and dishes at that fan festival. We're going to be doing what we can to mobilize our community partners and all of our groups to really participate in the municipal consultation in the fall so that councillors and staff hear about what people want to see in the reuse regulations. And we're going to continue to collaborate with community groups.